I'm taking you out of the scrub below, sparking plateaus where the cold wind blows. One step higher every week we go, turning little wins into more five.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Legacy Scrublands podcast, the podcast that takes you out of scrub lows, past plateaus, and into more 5-0s each week. I am your host, Kyle. With me, as always, is the Spike on the mic, Adam.
Hello, hello.
We also have a special guest today. We have Legacy Small Talk podcast best and brightest, the Doomsday expert himself, Eureka22422, but we like to call him Mike. Mike, what's going on, man? How you doing?
Not much. I'm doing well. Pleasure to be on the podcast. Thanks for the invite.
Yeah. Well, thanks for being here, man. So we'd love to talk some Doomsday and then hear kind of like from your expertise. Before we do that, we always kind of jump into our filthy casual question of the week. So Adam, super spiky. Me, I wish I was as spiky as he is. So I got to bring in a little bit of casual. So, all right.
Yeah,
so my filthy casual question for the week is, I know that you're mainly an MTGO grinder, but I do hear that you have like some pretty like actual paper Magic cards. So for both you and Adam, because I know Adam's got just kind of a dope collection of cards as well. So what is a card in your collection that you are particularly proud of? And what is a card that you kind of have your eye on that you would love to get into your collection at some point, either like the Holy Grail or just something cool that you're trying to keep your eye on? So add a little bit of MTG finance to the first part of the podcast for us.
All right, Mike, you start. Yeah, that's a great question. One of the cards that I relatively recently acquired was the Murktides from the Secret Lair Showdown.
Oh, I love those.
Yeah, so I picked up those. I picked up 3 of them last Eternal Weekend to play in my filthy Spike Blue-Black Reanimator deck at the time. And a card that I have my eye on, the Judge Lightning Bolts are something that I love the art. I love the foiling of them, but I have never had a reason to play them because it's Lightning Bolt and I'm playing Dark Ritual most of the time. So I haven't just really had like a use case for them. If I played Rug Delver back in the day, I probably would have acquired them, but I was casting more unfair stuff. So that's probably my answer.
Okay. You don't want the lightning bolt to be the fourth spell for the car. I get it, man. Like that's too much.
But to be honest, you wanna know what's funny? I was in why am I blanking? TOA's inbox to pick up 4 lightning bolts when I was playing the Dark Ritual Arclight Phoenix deck for a little bit.
Oh, nice.
I was about to pick them up and then they printed car and I was like, let me first be a little responsible and see if Phoenix actually is playable at all anymore, or like if you can play them together, or whether you should just be triggering cars. So it's kind of on pause, but if I can make Phoenix work, because I was playing a Phoenix list with Doomsday in the sideboard with the idea that like,
oh my gosh,
hey, people bringing graveyard hate to deal with Arclight Phoenix, and you're just like, I'm just gonna resolve Doomsday where my graveyard doesn't matter at all. Yeah, so I swear to God, in the DMs, I was working on trying to pick those up, and I probably still will. You guys might get a kick out of it. The cards that I need to unload some cards. I purchased 4 Odyssey foil Entombs like 3 months before Eternal Weekend last year. Yeah, like 3 months before Eternal Weekend last year, and I'm like, they still held their value well enough that I should probably at some point offload them, since I basically only play Legacy. And yeah.
That's so funny. I'm 100% in the same boat. Got it right before EW last year, and yeah, it was a sad day, a few months ago. But no, that's awesome, man.
I also for sale as well. So if you know of anybody, that needs...
mine's on Marketplace right now, just for sale. So
oh, nice. Well, maybe you could trade them to TOA for some nice lightning bolts.
Yeah. Awesome.
Well, Adam, tell me about yours, man. You got a dope collection too. Like, what do you like? What's something that you're particularly proud of, and something that you want to pick up?
So I'd say for me, like I said, I think everybody's dream, right, is like to collect the Power 9, but that's just with money. I think one of the most I'm like treasured is the last year, again, I did well Eternal Weekend, so I got the Tendrils of Agony. So that one was just like I put the work in, and like you get a reward seeing that. So I really did value. I think that's one of the most that I value.
That was a good answer. I picked up one of those too last year. I was pretty proud.
Yeah.
And
it looks
I'm an
sick,
OG
too.
Storm, and I'm an OG Storm player from like 2010. So I played Ant
Oh, yeah.
for almost a decade, and
my
so
gosh.
that meant a lot to me to pick up specifically that card.
I'm never playing Storm in my life, but it's hanging on my wall, and I love it.
Nice.
And then I would say like for what's coming up, obviously EW this year, it's crop rotation, I believe, is the cards. I'm like, I have goals for like the year, and like that is one of my goals. Like I just want to top 32. Get another like really awesome card. Be really excited now. I would love that.
Another card on the wall for you.
Yeah. How about you, Kyle?
Is it loam? Because it was crop rot last.
Yeah, I was gonna say I think it's loam.
Oh.
I don't think it's crop rot. I think it's loam.
Yeah, I think it's loam. Crop rot was a couple years ago, 2 years ago.
No, you're absolutely right.
It is. Well, yeah, you can play some loam pox though once you pick that up, man. It'd be pretty nice loam. But dude, you already know I don't have like an actually incredible collection yet. I don't know if you know of this card called Scrubland from the Unlimited set. I got a pretty nice near mint or lightly played one. That's about as crazy as my collection gets. So just want you to know, like, sorry to flex on you guys like that. I just want you to know that we're not in the same tax bracket. But so my
sick card.
Dude, it's cool. I like so Mike, I'm a big Taxes fan. It's not going very well right now in the car world, but that's kind of the deck that I've enjoyed playing for the most part. And those are the kind of like the duels that I'm pretty proud of. As far as like pieces to pick up, I'd love to be able to acquire a couple more dual lands just to have the ability to, I don't know, throw other decks together. So I don't know, like at least one copy of each dual land I think would be a pretty cool place to start of like, oh, this is a nice collection that I have together. The other thing would be if I ever want to like foil out, make something look really cool. I'm a big fan of the Mystical Archive Force of Wills that I cannot afford right now. So they're like
nice.
You know what I'm talking about? Like the Japanese art. So I'm like, yeah, those are very nice to look at. And I don't even bother putting them in my cart, to be honest with you. I just, click on them on TCG Player just to see imagine what it'd be like, But that's
funny because I'm a big like foil lover. Obviously, I pretty much have all old borders. So like I played the Judge Force of Wills for a while, and then I eventually like switched them over to the old border just to match the
retro
aesthetic of the deck. Yeah, the retro ones, just
nice.
because they match the deck better. But hey, it's perfect that you're a D&T player because I love memeing on D&T players. So
dude, I've heard the podcast enough to know that I almost didn't want to tell you. I almost was like, dude, let's just bring it out. Like I was like, Adam, hey, dude, I almost was like, hey, pretend that I'm a Storm player, something cool. You know what I mean?
Maybe you'll like me. Think I'm cool.
Yeah.
I mean, luckily for you, if I ever win a Scrubland, I'll hit you up because I wouldn't be caught dead owning a white dual land.
Dude, good looking out, man. I appreciate that.
Mike, we have the same mindset, by the way. I'm the same way.
I own like 12 FBB duels, and none of them are white. None of them.
I'm working on maybe like a Tundra next, at least something respectable that I can play Force of Will with. So I don't know.
Or
we'll
you can consign. Yeah, good.
Yeah. So maybe like the Felia Blink deck. I think that's kind of sick. Like you get to do some stifling and stuff like that. That's something I'm kind of keeping an eye on. I feel like don't get me wrong. Hey man, I love my Taxes. I just feel like that maybe is a little bit more respectable in some of the legacy discords. You know what I mean? So
well, they're also probably opposite ends of when they're good, right? Like the Stifle deck's usually going to be good against some degenerate stuff, and the Taxes is going to be good if it's all fair in the world.
Right.
Dude, absolutely. And right now, our meta is the most unfair that it probably gets.
So
I just got
unfair,
run, dude. Our like because we're both like in the same locals, or if I'm just like running a league, I just watch people just like stunt on me turn one. I don't even get to draw a card. I'm just like, shit. Okay. Well, that's just how it feels right now.
That's how I got introduced to Mike. Or was it last week? Right? We're in the challenge, and Mike just ran over me with a car. I was like, all right, bro, I got to talk to you. Like, I'm gonna bring you on the podcast. I need to learn what's happening, and like, you have to teach me the ways of being a better player. So no, I love that you're here.
One of the funniest things is in one of the big discords I'm in, like people have memed it's like Eureka 7s because I just opened some of the most busted hands, and they send me screenshots of their hand and they're like, "Did I do it right?"
Well, I took a picture of the one you did me. Let's see if I still have it. You like dazed your own, was it pedal or bobble or something to get the fourth trigger? I was like, that's
Yeah.
crazy. And you just murdered me that turn. I was like, oh
Yeah,
my
dude.
God.
Yeah, I think you put that picture in the Discord when you're like, "Hey, like, I think Mike's interested in like joining us on the podcast," but like in the background, you just see
My
four
death.
Yeah, exactly. But anyway, man. So let's jump into some Doomsday talk. I mean, it sounds like you're the perfect expert to give us a little bit of a tutorial on this, man. So can you give us, just like for the listeners who maybe don't know, I would assume most people kind of know what Doomsday is, but in simple terms, like what is Doomsday, I guess historically, and kind of what is it like now? We know like with Car, but like as a simple term, like what's Doomsday trying to do, and like why are we picking Doomsday up?
Yeah, so Doomsday is a very fast combo deck that essentially tries to put Doomsday on the stack in most versions as fast as possible. So Dark Ritual is kind of its best friend, right? Dark Ritual to make 3 black and cast Doomsday. Doomsday, if you haven't played against it, says so as it resolves, you lose half your life, rounded down or rounded up. So if you're at 20, you just go to 10. And then you can use your graveyard and your deck to make a 5-card library. Now we are fortunate enough to have an amazing card, Thassa's Oracle, that happens to say when the trigger resolves, you win the game. So it's pretty easy to understand how if you make your deck only 5 cards and it's 5 demonic tutors or vampiric tutors, that you can set up something to resolve a Thassa's Oracle with a trigger that's at least somewhat protected. And that's mostly what Doomsday is trying to do. Historically, there's been plenty of crazy win conditions over the years because Thassa's Oracle has not always been around. So prior to it, you would use LEDs, and the name escapes me, but you'd use a card that lets you exile the top cards of your deck, and you'd exile a bunch of LEDs, and then a Burning Wish for a Tendrils of Agony, or some other way to win the game, depending on what era we're talking about. And that's kind of what Doomsday is trying to do. The other thing about Doomsday is it's historically been a blue and black deck primarily. And so it gets all the best interaction. It gets discard spells and Thoughtseize. It gets counter magic and Force of Will and Daze. And so not only is it a very fast deck, it's also a very like protected deck when it combos.
Okay, sick, man. Do you
make that deck sound so sexy? I was like, now I want to play it. That sounds so good.
Well, Mike, I'm curious, man, because you said like Thassa's Oracle as the new way of doing it. Do you like Thassa's Oracle? Obviously, pretty easy. Like, is that your favorite way of doing it, or do you kind of miss the old days where you're like, man, I used to have to work for this? Or is it Thassa's Oracle kind of nice because you have like an easier way of closing the game? Like, what's your take there?
So I think a lot of the memes about how difficult Doomsday is got built on old versions of it because it really was like a spreadsheet deck back in the day, right? Like back with previous win conditions, there was a bunch of different piles that you had to memorize depending on the board state, how much mana you had, what hate you had to beat, etc. Because it wasn't one card that just let you win the game. It was a pile that you had to use all of the cards in to create mana and do all of that. And because that was more complicated back then, it got a really bad rep for being like impossible to play. Well, it turns out that the deck gets a lot simpler when you just have one card that says you win the game on it. So I think that this era of Doomsday is much more friendly for new players to pick up. And it's also, I think, more interesting because it's not so stressful to play as some of the prior versions have been.
Okay. And what's your take now that you guys are running the Fantastic card? The card, so for those of you guys that have not been here for a little bit, 3-drop artifact that basically says on your 4th spell, non-creature spell, you get 4/4/4 haste flyers, and you're cracking your opponent for 16 pretty quickly. So what's your take on adding that to the deck now? Do you feel like it's like super powered, like supercharge the deck even further? Is it just crazy, or is it about the same? Like, do you feel like it doesn't matter? Like with Car could go and Doomsday still is just crushing it.
I think it's like a multi question there, because so on the surface of it, Car is extremely good and it happens to work perfectly with rituals and lotus petals and cards that you're already playing in the deck, right? Dazes, as Adam mentioned before, like being able to go Dark Ritual Car, 0-drop, daze your own 0-drop to trigger Car, like it naturally fits into the shell that you already had built for the most part.
Right.
There's a couple of critiques to it, though. It doesn't really solve problems, right? Stifle effects, consign effects that are good against Thassa's Oracle are also good against Carr. Heavy Fawn, Force of Negation, heavy interaction, deafening silence, like the cards that are good against Doomsday are mostly good against Carr. Like sure, Force of Vigor, there's some like other random cards that are only good versus Carr or Doomsday. Endurance, good against Doomsday, Force of Vigor, good against Carr, for example. However, it basically gives you 8 threats, which means that the turbo versions of the deck are a lot more consistent. So it definitely powered it up, but it didn't fix any of the problems. So if you were opening good Doomsday hands, you won't necessarily see a huge difference. You'll see more consistency in opening those good hands, but it doesn't actually add anything outside of consistency, in my opinion. And so one of the big things that's popped up recently is the blue-white Stifle Consign deck, right? The blue-white fair deck. That deck is very good at beating pretty much all the plans that the Doomsday deck can put on the stack. So it's very good, and it's better against the decks that don't interact with it because it's so much more consistent at opening those broken hands. But then there's other versions of Doomsday that kind of are built to deal with the meta that can deal with Turbo Doomsday. So if Carr went away, I've been playing a lot of Tempo Doomsday prior to Carr getting printed, and Tempo Doomsday is essentially, I made this joke, I think it's pretty funny, is that blue-black tempo playing Carr right now is basically just Tempo Doomsday. They're a tempo deck that added Dark Ritual and Carr to it, right? We were a Doomsday deck that added all the fair blue cards, so Tameo, Flow State, etc. to your
too, right? Like you get the like
4 Baraglyphs in the sideboard, 2 Murktides in the main. So you have the tempo elements, and the idea with that is, well, if your opponent has a handful of Stifles and you just play a turn 1 Tameo, like they're kind of sitting there while you're just drawing a million cards, and eventually you'll figure out a way to win the game. So I think it really depends. I think if blue-white stays, because Fantasticar is not just in Doomsday. If Fantasticar was mostly just in like Doomsday and Storm, I don't think blue-white would be as present. But because Fantasticar is in so many different decks, a deck like blue-white, a deck like blue-white kind of makes sense to stick around. And if it sticks around, obviously it's not great for the deck that's trying to resolve a bunch of things that they can interact with.
Right. Yeah, and I have a follow-up question kind of tying, it sounds like, there's so many strong things with Doomsday. But I also heard earlier that, you were a Reanimator player, especially like the blue-black version. And they are kind of similar, where it's like that blue-black, combo deck, and you have some backup. So can you kind of highlight like what advantages you have over with Doomsday than you did back with like Reanimator?
So it's funny. I actually played Tempo Doomsday when Frog existed. Until Frog got banned. And it's pretty funny because some people realize it, a lot of listeners may not. The thing about Psychic Frog, which was a blue and a black for a 1/2, and when it dealt damage to an opponent or a planeswalker, you draw a card, and then you can discard a card to put a counter on it or exile 3 cards from your graveyard to give it flying. It gave you a blue devotion for Thassa's Oracle, which made removal not as good. So you could build like a double Thassa's Oracle pile where you have 2 on the bottom. And even if you have 1 card in your deck, it gives you devotion. And then also a common way for certain decks to interact with you was endurance. And you can just discard cards from your hand and exile them from your graveyard to play around endurance. So like it was actually a really cool threat.
Oh, that's really
It also draws you into your pile, right? It can draw you into your pile. Like it can do everything. That card did so much. So the long and the short of the reason is when I play Tempo Doomsday, it basically is a sign that I think that all of the best tempo threats fit into Doomsday the best. And so the current version before Carr got printed has Tameo and Flow State, which are arguably the 2 best like tempo cards out right now. When Entomb was out, the biggest problem was Entomb changed the way that decks had to interact with it, right? Because you had to respect the end step Entomb, untap, reanimate, but you also had to respect just the creatures or Tameo or whatever else they're doing. And so essentially Tempo Doomsday was just a worse reanimator deck. Like that's all it was. It was a deck that you had to invest Dark Ritual and Doomsday to put your threat on the stack, not just Entomb. And so that's why I ended up switching over to it, because it was more resources to do basically the same thing. And the fair pivot was equivalent almost out of the reanimator deck as it is out of the Tempo Doomsday deck, with the exception of you can cast Barrowglyph on turn 1 with a Dark Ritual.
Ooh. No, thank you so much.
Yeah, one quick one that I have as well. So you said you played Storm before Doomsday. So like obviously you're a great combo mastermind. What was the take between like why taking Doomsday? Like if someone's looking at Legacy and trying to figure out like what's the combo deck that they would want to get into, why would they want to pick the Doomsday over the Storm? Because I mean, right now both seem to be very well positioned. But if you had to, like, let's say you're an expert at both, what would make you lean more towards the Doomsday deck versus the other quick combo type?
Yeah, so historically, Storm has had a couple of different versions. The one I played was Ant Ad Nauseam Tendrils, which was like the Past in Flames version of the Storm deck. As time went on, discard got worse because everybody's deck is just full of more bangers. So like you discard their best card in their hand and they just draw another insane card, which wasn't really the case back then. So the current version, the only current version of Storm that you see besides a little bit of Black Saga Storm is you see the Epic Storm, and the Epic Storm is an Echo of Aeons deck that is very threat dense and it's fast. The reason that I like Doomsday, so a funny just little aside for anyone who doesn't know, I'm not sure if you two know, some of you guys might, but maybe listeners don't. Ant back in the day had a lot of people playing it, including Wonder Pro now, Monkeys Can't Cry, Ethan. A lot of the really good Doomsday players today played Ant back in the day when I played Ant. And so it was more we went from Ant to Doomsday, not that we left like Storm itself. It's that we enjoyed playing Ant, and when Ant was no longer super viable, Doomsday just kind of made sense. But today, if you look at it, really the difference is a Force of Will. When you start playing with Force of Will, it's really hard to go back, because Force of Will just gives you a lot more control over games rather than being on the draw against like a turn 1 Deafening Silence or like a lot of things that people can do on the play, a Chalice of the Void, whatever. Storm decks don't have the ability to like react to them. They have to bounce them or something else, which requires that your opening hand is pretty strong, because you can't open a force that can deal with whatever they have. You have to open a hand that contextually lines up with what they end up having, which is not like a foregone conclusion that you do.
Right.
When it comes to Fantasticar, the problem I have with Storm is if you think about how you cast Fantasticar, you can't turn 1 of Fantasticar with protection in Storm, because it requires a Dark Ritual, the car, a discard spell, but on turn 1 you would need a Lotus Petal to cast the discard spell. So if you did that, that would be 4 spells. Your car would be your 4th spell. With a Daze or a Force of Will, you can still protect that car on turn 1. And like we talked about earlier, you can then just use one of the counter spells to counter your 0 if you need to, but you have the ability to do that. So it really puts a lot of pressure on opening double threat, like Dark Ritual, car, LED Echo. Like if you open that in the Storm deck, you're presenting 2 threats. You can just car, and if they force it, then you can go LED Echo. But it's not quite as good at protecting them early. But Storm is definitely a very viable deck if you really enjoy just kind of putting together all the resources in your hand to win the game. It's a really fun puzzle deck in that sense, like looking, counting your storm, thinking through the type of interaction. Is that interaction going to add storm count? Because that's one of the coolest things, like getting to cast a dark ritual before you play your second land to try and bait out a daze on your dark ritual, and then just playing another land, casting another dark ritual, and you had no discard spell, but your opponent just countered your dark ritual because it looked like your dark ritual was like countering that, ends your turn. And so if you like putting together some of those plays and outthinking your opponent in certain things, Storm is really cool for that. Doomsday is more of a, I really enjoy trying to read and understand my opponents. What cards make sense that they could still have in hand that can interact with Doomsday or Thassa's Oracle? What cards would they have played already because they've had the opportunity, they've passed the turn with mana up, whatever, and then using that plus like your format knowledge and rationale to say these 5 cards will likely win the game through what I expect my opponent to be able to do.
Mike, you sound verbatim what we just went over 2 weeks ago. Like exactly that of how to look at somebody's hand, even when you can't see it, obviously, and just try to predict it. And another thing that we went over last week, which I would love to hear more from your side, is how it's such a powerful deck that what you're playing. How should people? How do you sideboard, and then what should other people do to sideboard against you? Like, what are you afraid of? So maybe you can delve into that a little bit.
Yeah, so before sideboarding, I'll just talk broadly speaking.
Yeah.
So like most of the fast Doomsday decks are inherently scared of like blue-red tempo because you're casting a spell that cuts your life in half, right? So you're going to 10 no matter what. And so Lightning Bolt plus 3 power creatures are very good at ending the game quickly after you've resolved Doomsday, which means that it becomes hard to play around much after you've resolved Doomsday because you can't pass the turn, and you might be dead if you pass the turn. Street Wraith costs 2 life to cycle. And so the aggressive tempo decks are pretty challenging. The 4 to 6 stifle decks are also pretty challenging for the same reason. You do have like Jace, Wielder of Mysteries in the board, which if you don't know what it is, it's a 4-mana planeswalker that when you play it, you can +2 and it mills 2 cards from, you can target whichever player you want and then draw a card. And if you draw a card when you have no cards in your library, you win the game instead of lose the game. So you can just like mill 2 random cards and then draw 2 cyclers and just like cycle through your deck, and then you win because you have no cards. And that beats Stifles because it's not a trigger. It's just like a state-based effect. It just happens when you draw and you don't have any cards in your deck. But inherently, Thassa's Oracle is a trigger. And so Consigns and Stifle decks do really well into Doomsday. And then aside from that, really, it's just proactive decks that can interact in multiple ways. So like a Thoughtseize deck that is also an aggressive deck can do pretty well against it. But those are mostly what you're scared of. You're scared of people who can interact with you in a couple different ways and also put enough of a threat on you that you can't like slow roll them.
Hey, Mike, I real quick, dude, I noticed that Death and Taxes wasn't on the list of things that you're...
Yeah,
what's that? Yeah, what is that about, man?
Most of the time I pair into XJ Cloud, he just concedes to me before he keeps his opening hand. So I'm not entirely sure. No, but the real of it is like, it's just, there's so much that it asks because like the Thoughtseize versions are definitely better. One of the things is in the matchup is if you keep a Thoughtseize, I'm going to keep a turn 1 Doomsday like almost all the time, or a turn 2 Doomsday. And sometimes you just don't find another Doomsday, right? So like the Thoughtseize draws can be okay. And post-board Deafening Silence plus Wasteland or like White Orchid Phantom and some of those, you can get got by some of that stuff. But by and large, you're spending your mana like on time to cast spells, and Doomsday is not doing that. Doomsday is cheating every corner it can on spending mana with Cyclers, Lion's Eye Diamond, Dark Ritual. Like it's basically just doing things faster than any deck that's spending mana to cast spells worth their mana is able to keep up with.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I've run into that deck plenty of times, just like in leagues and stuff. I've gotten lucky a couple of times where, I don't know, maybe like my opponent fumbled or something. But yeah, I liked your point about the Jace, Wielder of Mysteries, as well as Thassa. I know there was a time like we can talk about like what people would bring in against you, but I remember I had Disruptor Flute, and I thought that was a pretty good card, being like, oh, I'm just going to name Thassa's Oracle when he does this, and I was able to like kind of see the pile a little bit, and I was like, oh shoot, he has both of these in the pile, and I just was like, I don't know how I beat both. Like, there's no way to beat both of these, so I just was like, yeah, Scoops, you got it, man.
Yeah,
So,
that's one of the really common things now is like Jace also conveniently mills 2 cards, so you can just mill Thassa's Oracle plus Cavern or something if you want, and you can kind of put it in that pile for free. So that's the nice part about it. But I will say, so like when you look at sideboarding and Disruptor Flute, like just a quick hint, like just name Doomsday if you can, if it's not already cast. I imagine against Death and Taxes it's probably already cast, but in a lot of matchups, like a lot of people playing the Tron decks and stuff like that, trying to get cute and name Thassa's Oracle or Jace, like I built a pile against lands the other day where they hadn't cast a Disruptor Flute yet, but they also had been tapping out, so I figured out it was very possible they still had it, and so I just made the last card in my pile a Dark Ritual, and I just cast my Thassa through a Dark Ritual, and
okay, nice.
to pay for the Disruptor Flute. So like trying to get too smart, like if you're playing against a competent Doomsday player, like they know that card exists, and when you're building a pile, you have way more like opportunity to play around that card when you're building your pile than if you just jam it before I've done anything. Like if I kept my hand planning to cast Doomsday with 3 lands, it takes at least a Dark Ritual and a 4th land to cast that, right? So it's like it's quite a bit of time. So it's basically time plus be proactive is just a much better plan than trying to get cute and name Thassa or Jace.
Yeah, the idea that I had was just like obviously 100% name Doomsday. I think like I watched my opponent play Doomsday, and then I strategically left the flute on top of my deck and drew it right afterwards. I was like, oh, nice, man. Yeah, nice flute, idiot. Like, good job. So.
Yeah. Sometimes you can cheese them with naming Lion's Eye Diamond or something there if they're only on 1 land against you. Because if they do build a Jace plus Oracle pile, a lot of the times that requires Lion's Eye Diamond to cast Jace. And so if you use that plus a Wasteland or something, like if you just name Lion's Eye Diamond, there's some chance you can get them there. But
yeah, it's a tough matchup like, overall. Yeah, I recognize that you're probably not afraid of that one.
Oh, but no, I mean,
the blue red makes sense though, man. They're so fast, especially with like the Corey, like, Corey Bobble, they just start getting the beats down. So I could see that being definitely a problem.
Yeah, absolutely.
One quick question I had I know for today, just because of the car, Mind Break Trap is probably pretty good against you. But in like, let's say in 45 days, the car is not a thing. Is Mind Break Trap even a card that's good against you? Or do you feel like all Doomsday player can and will play around it?
It's funny because Mind Break Trap actually does nothing if you play it right, because you can go Dark Ritual Car 0 day 0 and 0, and they had
I felt that.
Interaction at all.
I had that in our match. I had it in my hand. I was like, well, this feels terrible.
So. Yeah. So like if people sequence it, or if you cantrip looking for the Dark Ritual of the car, and then you go Dark Ritual Car 0 drop, like it can get you. So the long and the short of that is usually it's okay as like another fork piece, but it is not a good single piece of interaction to like keep against them, right? Like, so what I try and use as an example is like, if I can same turn kill a Forge player, I will, because if they untap with Karn or they untap with Kozilek's Command, that's very likely to be in their hand, right? And so when you start talking about all the different cards that Forge could untap with, Karn, Disruptor Flute, Kozilek's Command, Dismember. I got into a spot where I saw Dismember and I had to play around the Dismember, and the one card they drew was a Kozilek's Command, and that's a fork because I can't clear my pile to beat Dismember and then not die to the Kozilek's Command making me draw a card. There's just no way to beat that.
Interesting, yeah.
But so, for example, if I was playing against Forge, I would not respect Mind Break Trap unless I could absolutely afford to do it, because it's just so much more likely that they have other interaction, and guessing exactly what type of interaction when you have to build different piles depending on what that interaction is more difficult. But out of a deck like Death and Taxes, for example, if you had Mind Break Trap in there, I can just build a couple fetch lands and a Thassa's Oracle and draw 2 more times, and I'm not going to die to damage in those 2 turns anyway, so I could just build a couple fetch lands, a couple lands to fetch, and a Thassa's Oracle, take a couple draw steps and win that way. So like likely I'm not going to same turn kill a D&T player who needs to be a little bit more like hope and a prayer that this Mind Break Trap has text.
No,
Right.
thank you so much. Yeah, no, that's good. Listen, I never brought it in before when it was without car, and now with car. Listen, maybe I'm even going to change it again, just by what you're saying is like a competent Doomsday player is going to play around it. What is like the best card right now? If I'm just going to be
Mm.
selfish, and I'm a Grixis deck, what is the best card that you are afraid of today against Grixis colors?
I think stifle effects are the most annoying. Like a couple consigns in the board's not that big of a deal, but when you have more than 4 copies, like because a lot of consign decks were playing like 2 consigns in the board, and now a lot of the decks are playing like up to 6 consign slash stifle effects, sometimes maybe even more between the main and the side.
Wow.
From Grixis specifically, those cards are pretty annoying. Thoughtseize is always good, but those effects are just ones that, depending on what's going on and how the game is going, like if there's any real pressure or anything at all, the other issue that you run into is you do only get 5 cards in your pile. So like against blue white, I'll build double Thoughtseize, Oracle, Thassa, and something else. Or I mean,
Yeah.
Oracle, Cavern, and something else. And sometimes they just have force, consign, and you just can't beat that with 2
Right.
Thoughtseizes. Like you just don't have enough cards in your pile to beat that. And so, if you have a high density of that type of effect, it's very annoying.
No,
Yeah,
thank
the
you so much.
consign seems really good right now. I was looking up building some decks on MTGO. Dude, consign for an uncommon is 30 ticks right now on MTGO. It's just like everybody's trying like to stock on that is crazy. So that makes sense, man. Sorry, I want to jump into a quick question for like you talked about like how to build like if I'm playing a taxes deck, I'm gonna build my pile this way. How do you go about building your pile? Like, do you know kind of what you want to build pretty early on, like once you figure out the matchup, or how do you decide like what that pile is going to look like?
Yeah, we'll delve into one of my coaching sessions right now. So,
Yeah.
Oh,
so building piles, there's a couple of things that are really important. First of all, simplify it down to say like the pile needs to almost always, unless Thassa's in your hand or something like that, the pile almost always includes a win condition, mana to cast the win condition if there's any like lack of that when you resolve it. Interaction, whether that's Thoughtseize, Force, whatever, and then cyclers or cantrips. Like that is what a pile is built of, right? Like it's built of mana, a win condition, interaction, and then draw spells. So when you simplify it down to that, now it's really simple even more to go one more level and say, so whenever you build a pile, like 2 to 3 of those cards, depending on the board state, are spoken for, right? Like if you cast a turn 1 Doomsday and you have no more lands in your hand, well, guess what? A Cavern of Souls or a Lion's Eye Diamond is already spoken for. A Thassa's Oracle is already spoken for. So you've already built 2 cards in your pile.
yeah.
So when you simplify it down to say like what cards have to be in your pile just to win the game, and then the rest of it is a little context dependent on how you're going to try and beat certain matchups. And so one of the most common questions I get is like, if you're on the play blind, you cast Doomsday on turn 1, let's say you have like no more cards in your hand, right? Like you just are hellbent, you mold the 4 or whatever and cast land, Dark Ritual, Doomsday, or mold the 3. The pile that you typically want to build is, first of all, I always respect Wasteland because it's a card that when you're on the play, it's played in high numbers and you have to fetch a Dark Ritual, you have to fetch an Underground Sea to cast Doomsday. You can't fetch a basic island, right? And basic Swamp doesn't cast Thassa's Oracle. So you have to like understand that you can get Wastelanded. The next thing is like, what's the fastest pile? So I'm gonna go back and say I have a fetch land in my hand because I want to give myself a little bit of leniency here. But let's say you have just a soul fetch land in your hand. So the most common blind pile that I build is Cycler on top. So like Street Wraith, Edge of Autumn, Thassa, and then Cavern and the fetchable land. And the reason is if I get my next turn and my opponent is on a non-interactive deck or Thoughtseize me or does something that's not relevant, I can cycle twice into Thassa's Oracle, and then I can fetch the second land and cast Thassa's Oracle. It's not through a Cavern, but I can do that.
Right.
And so if I'm playing against any other combo deck or anything like that, my first thought, besides losing the Wasteland, which is why I have 2 lands in that pile, is how do I win as fast as possible if I have to? And then the Cavern being the last card says, well, if my opponent shows me a blue land, I'll just pass one more time and then cast Thassa's Oracle through a Cavern. And because I have a fetch land in my hand, that second land's not wastelandable. So even if my opponent goes Wasteland Go, I can draw, play a fetch land, and then the following turn I can win through Cavern of Souls. So it's giving you the most inner protection that you can get with the least amount of resources up front to do that. So that's like a good blind pile to make just because of the nature of it. When you go from there, you really have to think about the clock, how much time you have depending on the matchup, right? What your opponent's likely to do with that time, and then what interaction can kind of deal with that. So if you're looking at like a blue-white deck, right? If you're passing the turn to a blue-white deck, you know that they have cantrips in their deck and that they have consigns and stifles in their deck. And so you have to put at least one Thoughtseize in that pile, because even if they didn't force your Doomsday, that's just even more likely that they have some sort of interaction to beat your Thassa's Oracle trigger, right? And so you start kind of saying, how long do I have? How bad is it the more turns I keep passing? And then how much interaction am I allowed to build into the pile? And so when you start looking at that, you simplify it down to most piles are just iterations of other piles, right? Like these are the 2 to 3 cards that are required for your pile, and then these other cards are just iterations depending on what you have in your hand, how much time you have, etc., right? Because one of the piles that I really like building is with Brainstorm, because it gives you a little bit of latitude of what you need to do. And so, for example, if you have a couple lands in play, you can build like a Cycler on top and then a Brainstorm and then like Cavern, Thassa, Thoughtseize. And you could decide whether you want to Cavern out the Thassa's Oracle, whether you want to cast the Thoughtseize and wait a turn because you're worried about a consign. So if there's anywhere that you're not entirely sure about what your opponent's going to be doing, the cards like Brainstorm and Consider allow you to manipulate the pile to change on the fly if there's a couple different avenues that your opponent could take to try and interact with you. But really the long and the short of it is, first, just start building piles that cast Thassa with a reasonable amount of time, start building in a protection spell, and then start understanding how the cantrips in your hand, the cyclers in your hand, the lands in your hand iterate those piles, because you no longer need them in the pile because they're in your hand, right? And that helps a lot of that. And then one other pile building thing that a lot of people don't realize is like your fetch lands are effectively draw a card, right? Because they take a land out of the pile. And your fetch plus surveil land is effectively draw 2 cards because you can surveil away a card. So there's little things that you learn over time for additional like benefits, but I would say a lot of the reason that people are scared of Doomsday is because they see like the 2% of matches where you build like a crazy complex pile to beat a million things, when in reality like 98% of the piles are something similar to the couple of piles that I just told you, which are not very complicated.
Wow, you gave so much awesome information. I'm like so excited to play Doomsday. I still have to buy a few of the cards to do it, but you make it sound so cool to play. I love it.
Yeah, I mean, pretend to make it sound easy though. Like I'm still. You're like, yeah, you just do this, and this is your power. Like it makes sense that like, yeah, I gotta have a Thassa, I gotta have this. I'm sure if you want, like, I'll record a video of me going 05 and send it to you. Just be like, hey man, I don't know.
Let's do it. No,
I have no idea what happened to me.
Yeah, a lot of the other things are like, okay, if you have a horrible memory, you probably don't want to play Doomsday. But like outside of having a horrible memory, right? Like there's a lot of things that just like stick in your head, right? So like I built this like there's a pile that beats Grindstone activation no matter when they activate Grindstone. I have used that pile like maybe twice in the last like 2 years. Gosh. But I still remember it because after you understand the logic behind it, it's not like super complicated, right? Like if you build Street Wraith, Edge of Autumn, Thassa, Edge of Autumn, Thassa, no matter when they mill you, you automatically get to win, because if they mill the first 2 cards, you just draw Thassa with 2 cards left in your library. If they mill in response to the first cycler, then you mill Thassa and a cycler and then cycle into Thassa. It doesn't matter when they mill you, you automatically get to win. But again, that's something that I've used like twice in 2 years, but it's a specific pile that comes up in a niche scenario that you just kind of remember because it's the only thing that wins from board state that you're familiar with, right? But most of the other things are more or less just how much interaction can you afford to build into the pile, and how much what resources are going to be important given the board state that you're in.
Yeah, that's a great point. How often are you trying to clear the pile? Because I know there was a recent tournament online. It was the Impact. I don't know if you saw. It was like a European, and there was plenty of like Doomsday happening. I know a buddy of mine who loves Doomsday. He was like, "Oh man, you can't." He like commented on how the Doomsday player, I guess he cleared his pile and then lost to the concept of like the person saying, "No, you go ahead and draw." So how often like are you going and being like, "I got to clear this pile," or knowing ahead of time, like you just said, to the oh shoot, would you
the painter grindstone, yeah.
The painter grindstone, you're like, I know I gotta leave. So how often are you do you play it safe typically and say like, I want to leave this on? Like, or is that just something that you kind of get over time of knowing when you gotta clear, knowing when you gotta leave X cards on top?
It kind of depends, but most of the time it's based off like the common interaction, right? Like against D&T, you basically always clear the pile because one of their only interactions is Solitude or Swords to Plowshares. And you're basically always going to clear it against them. Against Reanimator, for example, you don't have to clear the pile because there's no cards in the deck that can interact with it. One of the things that I advocate for heavily, which it's pretty cool that you mentioned that. Actually, shout out to a couple of the people that were in PP and Bakunin. Bakunin top four'd the Spanish Nationals, and PP made it to the finals of that, and they're in my Discord. And so we were talking quite a bit about it, and it's pretty it's pretty cool. But like, it's basically, look at Goldfish as often as is convenient for you. And one of the best ways to get better at Doomsday is just to look at lists, because the more that you're looking at lists, the more that it naturally comes to you what cards people play in their deck that matter, because maybe 50 of the 60 cards in their deck don't really matter. The 10 cards that matter in different ways, Wasteland or Deafening Silence or Flute or whatever, you know how those matter. So like a good example of that is like, most people would say, like, I board in Fawn versus D&T, and most people are like, why would you board in Fawn versus an all creature deck? Because Deafening Silence is one of the only cards that has text on it in that matchup, right? Yeah. Same with against Energy. So like, if you look at the list and you really narrow it down to what cards matter in the matchup, you end up understanding how to board, how to play the matchup, etc. But to clear the pile, it's the same way. Like, are they likely to have removal in their deck against me post board? Do they even have removal? And if so, how much removal do they have versus these other things, right? For example, against Energy, they have Pyroblast. Well, that doesn't only counter Thassa's Oracle, it also is a removal spell if I don't have an empty pile. So Cavernous Souls in an empty pile becomes pretty important in that matchup, because it both makes my Thassa uncounterable and it clears and I have to clear the pile to make sure that I don't lose to killing my Thassa's Oracle. But for example, with Reanimator, one of the cool things that I like to do, I typically play exactly 2 Graveyard Hate cards. And if I win game 2, like let's say I lost game 1 and I win game 2, I'll put my 2 Dothies on the bottom of the pile almost every time. So my opponent looking through my exile doesn't see the Dothies and doesn't necessarily have answers to them post board. They may board out their show and tells. Yeah, they may board out their show and tells and bring in their fast combo, and then I'm just like, all right, force your first thing, Dark Ritual Dothy, go. And they just have no answers now.
Now I know. Now I know.
You were dropping crazy knowledge, and we don't know how like hold you up for too long, but I do have a question that I kind of want to ask, which is, and you've already dropped like an insane amount of knowledge, but I'm curious, what do you think makes a great Doomsday player? Like, what's something that a great Doomsday player would know that a good Doomsday player maybe doesn't know?
Ooh, that's a good one. I would say in my coaching sessions, one of the big differences I notice between like good Doomsday players and like really good Doomsday players is all the not Doomsday stuff, all the not pile building. It's like keeping your hand. Like, one of the really common things with combo decks, and I'm sure Adam knows this with Reanimator, when you open your opening hand, it has to have a plan. Like, what's the plan of the opening hand? And the thing about Doomsday is you play a million cantrips, right? So a lot of good Doomsday players make good mulligan decisions, but then they start casting their cantrips and their cantrips don't follow their initial reason for keeping the hand, and they stray away from the reason and the plan that they kept the hand. And then they get into weird spots where by the time they resolve Doomsday, now you have to build a lot harder Doomsday pile because you didn't cantrip properly looking for the right thing, or you deviated plans, or something changed that there was no reason for it to change. So making sure that your mulligan decision and your keep lines up with your cantrip decisions. And then the second part of that is fetch patterns are really, really important in Doomsday, because your mana, the difference between having mana and lands in play when you resolve Doomsday and not, is the difference between having to include a whole extra card in your pile and potentially take you another turn, or resolving another spell in order to get that extra land. And so like a really common a common example is like, if you don't have a daze in your opening hand and you don't fetch basic swamp, when you just have like second land Lotus Petal Doomsday in your hand, like you're giving up equity. Your opponent chooses to wasteland you when you go Underground Sea, Thoughtseize. And if you just went Swamp, Thoughtseize, you're guaranteed to be able to go land Petal Doomsday the following turn. But if you go Underground Sea, you get wastelanded. And so while Swamp is not a great land to have in play, if your opening hand is saying, my plan here is the Thoughtseize and then turn 2 Doomsday, it does not make sense to fetch an Underground Sea and expose it to Wasteland,
right,
if that's what your opening hand does.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of people who see fetching basic Swamp as making no sense. But so fetch patterns and then cantrip consistency with your mulligan decisions are the two like biggest things that I still see good Doomsday players waffle on.
Wow,
I
that's
love
amazing
that.
advice. I love it.
Yeah, 'cause I really like the way that you said that too. You're like, the main thing is really not the Doomsday aspect of it, but it's like everything else. That's really clever, man. I like that.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people end up in spots, and this is just, it's not a tangent, it's just kind of a similar point, is if you're playing against like an Omnitel deck that's just packed full of stock ups, like you need to understand that that matchup is not one that you want to get to like turn 6, turn 7, where they're going to draw a million stock ups and just bury you with it, right? So then your mulligan decisions and then your cantrips have to line up with the idea that you want to cast Doomsday relatively quick. And that's just, again, something that you really have to understand your role in the matchup. And by the time that you do resolve Doomsday, if you're not thinking that, now a lot of the piles that you're building are extremely complex because your opponent just resolved the stock up after you resolve Doomsday, or like right before you resolve Doomsday. And while they didn't have force, they have 7 cards in their hand. And so if you would have just prioritized resolving that Doomsday 2 turns ago, you have to worry about a fraction of the things that you now have to worry about, which is part of what makes resolving Doomsday difficult.
Mike, dude, I love all the knowledge that you're bringing, man. I really appreciate it. And we don't want to keep you too late. So, like, honestly, Mike, thank you so much for joining us. We'll have to have you back out in 53 days when Car leaves, and you can talk to us about Tempo Doomsday. So
yeah, sounds good.
Sick, man. Well, dude, thank you again for joining us. Listeners, thank you again for hanging out and listening. Actually, real quick, Mike, can you give us a quick plug? Where can people find you if they want to learn more about Doomsday or just kind of hear a little bit of small talk?
Yeah, so I am a co-host of Legacy Small Talk podcast. You can find me on X and Blue Sky at Eureka22422 underscore MTG. And then I also do a weekly YouTube video if you want to watch some gameplay, just Eureka MTG. Yeah, so hit me up.
Awesome. I'm so excited to watch you now. I'm going to be the new Doomsday player next week.
I was going to say, I'm excited to hear how Adam's next challenge run goes as he gives.
Let's go.
You're going to see all this. You're going to see all this reanimate. Like when you look up his name, and then it's just going to be what the
Doomsday,
one Doomsday.
32nd place, last
Let's
place.
go.
All right, Mike. Thank you so much.
Yeah,
Love it.
Mike, thank you for joining. Listeners, thank you guys for tuning in, and we'll catch you all next time here in the Legacy Scrublands.
Peace.
Appreciate it. See ya.
I'm taking you out of the scrubs.